As a long-time fan of Final Fantasy games, I naturally get very excited at the prospect of a new entry in the series, especially on the run-up to release. However, with more recent titles in the franchise, I found myself in lengthy debates around what, and who, the games are for. Are they for the lovers of the older style turn-based games we grew up with? Well, not really. The games have been moving away from that style for the last decade or so. Well, surely the narrative and world building are amazing, it's a Final Fantasy game. True, but some of the more recent iterations have been slightly more divisive in that sense, especially among long-time fans of Final Fantasy. So what about Final Fantasy XVI? Where would my thoughts go to on this, and would I recommend this game? In a word, yes. Final Fantasy XVI is a damn good game, and not just for long-time fans of the franchise, but for fans of gritty action RPGs and general JRPGs and RPGs alike. Hey everyone, it's Riku from Robot Republic, and this is our mostly spoiler-free review of Final Fantasy XVI. Full of immersive and beautiful landscapes, in a world that feels alive, with exciting and intuitive combat, Final Fantasy XVI is a clear statement of intent right from the outset. Bringing the franchise back to the more medieval roots we saw from the earlier iterations of the franchise, the game manages to balance its Game of Thrones-esque inspiration narratively with what fans of the franchise recognise as Final Fantasy, albeit through a slightly more mature lens. And that mature lens offers us up a narrative that isn't just packed with excessive violence, some sex, and a lot more swearing than we might be used to, but also details the flawed and human nature of political tensions and wider conflicts, while keeping the focus on the characters rather than the wider stakes of the world. As opposed to the more generic dialogue of some of the more recent entries in the franchise, where all of the characters are focused from the outset on needing to save the world from imminent disaster, Final Fantasy XVI takes a character-focused view in a different sense. Through this focus on the characters, we not only get a more engaging story, but we see characters develop and grow in what feels like a much more organic way as we head towards the climax. The focus on Clive and his motley crew of friends as individuals rather than as a group makes for a far more engaging narrative, as we, the players, witness their lives, their trials, and their growth in a world of conflict in a way we haven't for some time in a Final Fantasy game. Speaking of characters, what sets this apart in my mind is not only the writing itself, but the performances. Producer Naoki Yoshida said that with 16, he wanted to focus on the English version and performance over the Japanese version to fully sell the European medieval fantasy. And the performances delivered by the incredible cast are nothing short of sublime, despite some very occasional lip sync issues. Taking the dialogue and written narrative to a new level that is both exciting and engaging, especially when looking at the variety of characters in the game and the nuances within each of the performances. However, and despite the broad variety of cultures that have clearly inspired the various nations of Valisthea, the lack of representation for people of colour is a very clear issue from the outset, especially when you look at the level of splendour and effort that has gone into both the overall lore and design of each of the nations within Valisthea as a world. That being said, the game does get some extra points for the excellent and normalised representation of LGBTIQ+ characters, and as someone who has longed for this for years, it is a very, very welcome addition to the franchise. I would also be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to shout out the newest and bestest boy in gaming, Torgal. Clive's steadfast companion offers players the option of some level of tactical thinking in terms of how his AI can be used in battle, especially when coupled with the variety of iconic abilities Clive unlocks as you play through the game. These two mechanics provide players with the opportunity of some more classic Final Fantasy style combat planning within the dynamic combat offered in the game. While we think about the combat, is it particularly innovative? Well, not hugely. However, what 16 does well is introduce players to the combat basics, your standard light attacks, magic attacks, and combo attacks, and then slowly introduces more mechanics, namely iconic abilities and iconic feats. Iconic abilities and feats, much like the name suggests, are actions Clive can use in combat to deal damage by calling upon the powers of one of the icons. Icons in Final Fantasy XVI are the name for what have been called anything from summons to aeons in previous entries in the series. Massively powerful godlike creatures that are linked to an individual known as a dominant. As Clive progresses through his quest, he will obtain the powers of several icons, and it will be down to each player to determine which icons and which abilities and feats they will use in combat, as Clive can only equip a limited number of both icons and their associated abilities in the game. This is where players will get some of the tactical gameplay that has been somewhat missing from more recent games in the franchise, as you will need to determine which icon and its abilities are the best for each combat encounter. That being said, and yes, this is a very mild spoiler, the lack of elemental weaknesses we've become used to are very much missing from this game, and this does feel like something quite big that is missing from the overall combat, and something that could have made for a more exciting and interesting combat system when you consider how this is a very dynamic one compared to what we've been used to in the past. In truth, the combat is also not that challenging, especially if you make ample use of the dodge button, effective and varied use of your various iconic abilities and feats, and always keep a decent stock of potions on hand. It is fun, but for those that want more of a challenge, it is unfortunate that the higher difficulties are locked behind New Game Plus. But when you consider that many players are going to be playing Final Fantasy XVI for its story, that's hardly a shock. And considering the story has enough intrigue to keep players interested, playing it through again for a more challenging combat experience won't feel like much of a chore for most people. A huge pull in the marketing for the game were the battles with the icons, and these are spectacular in the most literal of senses. Yes, these are gimmickier battles, however, they provide a nice change of pace and bring a huge level of drama, whilst demonstrating the raw, destructive power of some of the most recognisable summons from the franchise. Are they necessary? I'd argue yes. They don't drive the narrative in an overt way most of the time, and are definitely more set-piece battles, but they also demonstrate the sheer power of the icons, and, when you consider the comments from Naoki Yoshida in an interview from 2022, show that both dominants and icons are truly massively destructive forces. Since its early inception, Final Fantasy has given gamers some of the most iconic and recognisable pieces of music in gaming ever. From the Crystal Harp theme that's present in nearly every single game, to Zanarkand, the Chocobo theme or Tifa's theme, and One Winged Angel or Battle on the Big Bridge. The music of each game in the series works in tandem with the narrative, cutscenes and gameplay to really elevate the emotions, and Final Fantasy XVI is no different. With the immense talent of Masayoshi Soken composing the music, each beat and piece is constructed to add to the emotions, intrigue or drama of each scene or battle. Players of the critically acclaimed MMORPG Final Fantasy XIV will be all too familiar with Soken's approach to composing for Final Fantasy, and his distinctive approach and style complements the narrative at every single step, reflecting both the emotional tone and importance of scenes, as well as providing music that flawlessly drifts from calm field music to exciting and memorable tracks when Clive and the crew engage in combat. Along with the central narrative of the game are a whole host of side quests players undertake. Now, I'm going to be completely honest, these side quests for the most part took a leaf out of the smaller side quests available in Final Fantasy XIV. The whole talk to NPC A, go to place, talk to NPC B, or collect item, or kill group of enemies, then return to NPC A for your reward. But despite mildly dull and repetitive gameplay at times, you complete these side quests for their stories, and for the people that they are tied to. And some of these stories hold some of the best writing in the entire game, and really bring some of those emotional gut punches we've come to expect from a Final Fantasy game. The side quests also allow you to learn so much more about the world of Valisthea and the characters that inhabit this wondrously glorious world. You'll also meet characters you'll assume are just for that quest, only to see them grow and develop and appear later down the line in the game, within their own rights. And this is one of the game's biggest narrative pros. Completing these side quests will net you general crafting resources and gil, and here are my two minor gripes with the game. We all know that towards the end of a Final Fantasy game, or most RPGs, you will invariably or more likely have a lot more gil or currency than you know what to do with. However, there are so few things to spend gil on in 16 that you are more than likely going to end up with much more gil than you know what to do with by about the halfway point in the game. In earlier sections, you will probably be on the verge of spending a lot of gil, but as you progress, you'll find you can afford all the latest weapons and equipment, plus being fully stocked on potions and have loads of gil remaining. It just leaves me wanting something else to spend it on, so it's not just sitting there. I don't know, perhaps we'll get DLC where we can buy Clive a nice house, and all my spare gil will have a use at last, besides buying all the soundtracks for the Orchestrion. Yes, a minor spoiler, but we love the music in this game, so why wouldn't I point out that you can buy a load of tracks to play in your hideout. Gil aside, my other gripe with the game is the almost pointless crafting system. It feels as though it's been put in purely because the game is an RPG, and apparently all RPGs must have some form of crafting system. Much like the gil issue, you'll find yourself most likely hitting the latter stages of the game with more crafting resources than you need for anything. And considering the only things that change when you change your equipment is the look of Clive's sword, I'd have preferred this to have been left on the dev room floor. And mainly because it feels as though it was put in as more of an obligation, something that had to be in the game as it's an RPG. And when you consider the repetitive, almost MMO style side quests, you tend to find yourself wondering what the point of these were, as there could have been far more interesting and innovative ways for the game to explore different characters and provided us with a different system of upgrading our weapons, as opposed to a pointless crafting system. A newer mechanic, however, that is far more exciting than the aforementioned side quests are the hunts and the hunt board. These work pretty much as you'd expect a hunt to work in a game. However, what makes them exciting is the lack of handholding the game gives you. To find your notorious monsters and marks, you are given an area of the map to go to. Not a specific waypoint, a general area. From there, it's up to you, the player, to locate and eliminate your quarry for some rather nice rewards. Rewards that are more than likely going to be needed to craft the best gear you can actually get in the game and the best weapons you are going to want for the latter stages. Now, I started this review recommending the game as a long-time fan of Final Fantasy. But chances are, if you've made it this far, and if you have, thanks for sticking with me, you may be wondering if there are any major caveats to my recommendation outside of the niggles and gripes I've already mentioned. Honestly, there could be some others. I wish I could sit here and go through all the smaller moments of the game that I adored, some of the scenes and exchanges that made me literally laugh out loud or brought tears to my eyes. But I shan't. What I can say, however, is that it has been a very long time since I was completely captured by a Final Fantasy game in the way that 16 has captivated me. And I think Square Enix knows that too. By the end of the prologue, you will know if this is a game for you or not. It puts every single card on the table for you to see. If you enjoyed it, chances are the game is for you. And when you consider the prologue was released before the game was released as a very generously sized demo, it's clear that Square thought this too. So I stand by my original statement that I would recommend this game to anyone. If you're still on the fence, then grab the demo and try it for yourself. With a plot that spans continents from the earth to the very heavens without losing focus on the character-driven human core of the story, Final Fantasy XVI both breaks tradition with the older games in the series, while staying true to the reason that fans love the series so much, whilst also providing a series first for representation and not shying away from the grittier and grimmer aspects of our world. It manages to stand out as a Final Fantasy game for a new generation. The Final Fantasy franchise has lasted as long as it has because, much like the Phoenix, it has the uncanny ability to go through multiple rebirths and grow as both the landscape of gaming changes and as its fanbase does. And while some of these rebirths and changes have been less than stellar, Final Fantasy XVI burns with the intensity of a terror flare. Now, we have a whole host of extra Final Fantasy XVI content that I am planning coming to the channel very, very soon, including some tips videos and some more Let's Plays. So please make sure you're subscribed so that you don't miss any of that new content. And if you like this video, please hit the like button and let me know what your thoughts on the game are in the comments below. I would be really interested to see. Am I going to end up in another debate defending a game that everyone hates? Hopefully not. Anyway, thanks for watching guys, and we'll see you next time. Bye.